Good morning. Welcome back. Welcome everyone. It's almost exactly a year since we started this Tanya class, and it was the over the course of the last 31 classes we've explored many topics, and I very much like the style where, of course, Tanya is a flow when it builds on each other in every chapter, but every class is self-contained, which is great. If you ever miss a class, you don't have to worry about it. Every class you can come, but especially this chapter 32. In fact, in the first editions of Tanya, printing something in the 1800s was not as simple as it is today, where you go in Microsoft Word and you format it. It was a process in formatting and different editions. In the earliest editions of the printed Tanya, this chapter did not exist. It went from chapter 31 to chapter 30. Actually, I think chapter 30 was also not in the equation for different reasons. But it went from chapter 31 to chapter 33. It was only in the final printed version, I should say in the next printed version, that this idea was included. And it really is a self-contained chapter which talks about the mitzvah, the commandment of Ahavas Yisrael, of loving our fellow Jew.
This is still 18th century.
This is, yes, it's all by the same author, and it's not random, and it still fits into place. And we'll explore what the flow is, but really this chapter is a self-contained. In fact, for many people, when they start learning Tanya, this is the one they start with. It's such a fundamental principle of Judaism, such a fundamental principle of Hasidic philosophy, that this can also be a good place to start. We start in chapter 1 because we're boring and we go in order. But especially when young children are starting off, this is a very good place to start. Now, those of us who know Hebrew letters, what are the letters of 32? Lamed Bet, which is the word lev, heart. Heart. Lev.
Heart.
Now, nothing is accidental.
Live.
Yes. The chapter about love is all about in Perek Love, in the chapter of the heart, because this is really the heart of everything that we've been discussing. When you look a little bit deeper into our Judaism, into our connection with God, you find the principles that are in this chapter, as the Alter Rebbe will discuss. And it also, the Tanya is the foundational text of Hasidic philosophy. At the heart of everything that a Hasidic person does has to be this principle. And as a Chabad rabbi who grew up in Brooklyn and now lives in Carson City, one of the first questions I'm going to ask is, what in the world are you doing there? Right? And the answer is, the Rebbe sent out emissaries, messengers, Chabad rabbis, to every corner of the world where you'll find some Jewish people, you'll find a Chabad rabbi. Since the sanctions on Russia, it used to be, you would say, wherever you find Coca-Cola, you find a Chabad rabbi. These days, we're much more prolific than Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola isn't in every corner of the world anymore. What is it? What drives us to do that? What drives us to leave the comfort of a Jewish community and delicious kosher restaurants and all those conveniences and move out in the middle of nowhere? Is this chapter. In fact, in 1951, when the Rebbe was accepting the mantle of leadership of Chabad, it was exactly a year after the passing of his father-in-law, the previous Chabad Rebbe, and although he had been acting unofficially, and everyone sort of knew that it was going to happen, there was one event, a gathering on the anniversary, on the yahrzeit of his father-in-law's passing, where the Rebbe formally accepted the leadership. And in his opening address, he invoked every one of the previous Chabad Rebbes by telling a story about them. And all of those stories was a story of Ahavas Yisrael, of their love of a fellow Jew. Now these were Rebbes, their Torah scholarship, their miraculous nature, everything about them, you could say stories about all parts of their life. And yet the Rebbe focused specifically on their love for a fellow Jew. Because everything else, I don't want to say it's window dressing, but everything else is built upon the foundation, is built upon the heart of Ahavas Yisrael. What is the verse, the mitzvah, that tells us to love our fellow Jew?
I hereby take upon myself the mitzvah.
Which mitzvah?
Love your fellow man as yourself.
Love your fellow man as yourself. V'ahavta l'reyacha kamocha. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Now, there's a very big question, which is, how in the world can you love someone else as yourself? I'm me. I am myself. By definition, someone else is not me, and I can't love them as much as I love myself. These days, sometimes we have to reteach people how to love themselves as well. People are very down on themselves, and but a healthy person loves themselves. A healthy person forgives themselves, right? If you make a mistake, hopefully you don't start hating yourself because you messed up. You understand, I messed up, and I'll do better next time. And yet when someone else makes a mistake, when someone else messes up, when someone else wrongs us, how many times are we driving and we accidentally cut someone off and we say, oh, I'm so sorry, and we move on with our day. Someone cuts us off on the highway, forget about it. We're mad at them for the next 10 miles. How is it physically possible for me, a human being, to love someone else as myself? And the truth is that halachically, there are parameters. That halacha really is a realistic thing. Jewish law is something we can all do. And therefore, the law is very specific that the love part of it, whatever, we'll have to, we can work on that. The actual mitzvah of loving your fellow is to treat them as you would treat yourself and try your best. But the mitzvah itself, the verse is very clear. The pasuk, the Torah is very clear. Love your fellow as yourself. And the question is, how is that possible? Myself, I give endless chances. I'm always ready to forgive myself. I'm always ready to justify whatever I've done. For someone else, I can never do that. In fact, we're in the month of Elul. We're in the month of preparing for the high holidays. And there's an idea these days that we sort of take stock on what we've done. How was my previous year? What did I do right? What did I maybe mess up on? What am I going to try better next year? And a big part of that idea is that I'm turning to God and saying, I messed up, right? What's the whole Yom Kippur? Here are my list of sins, forgive me, and I'm ready, I'll try again better next time. For those of us that are, older than a couple of years old, we've been saying the same exact things for decades. We've been making the same exact mistakes for decades. Right? Don't we feel silly coming to God? It's Yom Kippur. I'm coming to God and saying, God, I can't believe I messed up again this year. Here are my list of sins. Next year I'll try better. If it was us, if someone came to us with that kind of thing, we'd say, really? That's exactly what you said a year ago, and 2 years ago, and 3 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 20 years. You've been saying the same thing. Why do we expect God to forgive us again and again and again?
If every year you do teshuvah, keep turning and turning, you end up back where you started.
Yeah, exactly. Eventually, if you keep on returning, you make a 360 and you're back exactly where you started. So what is this idea? The answer is that we run out of patience. God has no limits. God doesn't run out of patience. And therefore, though to another human being would feel silly coming and saying, forgive me again, with God that doesn't make that's not a factor. If we come with a full heart and we really mean it, God's ready and willing to accept it. And that's how we treat ourselves as well. We can make the same mistake so many times, and we're always ready to try again.
Like a father.
Like a father. Exactly. With ourselves, we have that ability. For someone else, we can never feel that ability. And this is the great question about this mitzvah, V'yahavta l'reacha kamocha. In the Chabad Siddur, I think in others as well, it's printed before every single day. The first thing we do before we start praying is, as Gershon quoted, I hereby accept upon myself the mitzvah of love your fellow as yourself. And the question is how? To answer this question, the Alter Rebbe is going to touch on a principle that he mentioned briefly in last chapter. Don't worry, we're not going to go over all the context. It's a long discussion. It's 31 chapters worth of discussion. But very briefly, the Alter Rebbe is talking about how sometimes we have to be realistic with ourselves and realize that we're sinners and we make mistakes. So then the question is, how does that not lead to depression? If I'm constantly down upon myself for all the mistakes that I've made, and the Alter Rebbe has some pretty stern language, some pretty sharp words about what you have to tell yourself, then I'm going to start feeling really bad about myself. And then that's not a good place to be in. And so the Alter Rebbe answers, and this is the fundamental principle, it depends on who are you. Are you your soul? Are you your spiritual side? Are you your godly side? every single Jewish person, every other person as well, but we're going to focus on the discussion about Jewish people today. Every single Jewish person has a soul. We also have an evil inclination. We also have that voice in our head that tells us to do bad things, or at least to do selfish things, and that is the battle that the Alter Rebbe discusses at length in the first 12 chapters of Tanya, which we're not going to get distracted by today. But we have that battle. And yes, sometimes I win and sometimes I lose. But who am I? Am I my body? Am I my physicality? Am I my animal soul? Or am I my godly soul? And the answer is, we are our godly soul. We don't feel that way because the animal soul is the consciousness that we feel most directly connected to. But when we realize that that is an illusion, the fact that I feel more my body than my soul is an illusion. I am primarily my godly soul. And that's why, even though my animal soul has messed up, I don't focus on that. I can deal with that, but I am my soul, my godly soul. And that's part of the discussion in chapter 31, and that will continue in chapter 33. But in chapter 32, the Alter Rebbe takes on that idea of I need to be a soul person, not an animal soul person, a godly soul person, not an animal soul person, and goes on a tangent and talks about how this is the fundamental principle of how it's possible to love your fellow as yourself. Which I wanted to say that, the Alter Rebbe wasn't, the structure that's in Tanya is not random. The Alter Rebbe wasn't just like, hey, this is a nice idea, let me throw it in, and hey, it works out perfectly, it's chapter 32. The Alter Rebbe is teaching us a very important lesson in this idea as well. That no matter what we're doing, no matter what we're discussing, no matter what else is going on, if we have an opportunity to love our fellow Jew, we have to jump on it. The Alter Rebbe is talking about something completely different, but it's now I gave him an opportunity to talk about loving our fellow Jew. He grabs the opportunity and teaches us an important lesson. So in the flow of Tanya, this doesn't have to be here. It's connected with chapter 31, obviously. It's not completely random, but it's a side point. This whole chapter could be in very big brackets, teaching us, no matter what's going on, we have to utilize the opportunity to love our fellow Jew. In fact, there's one of the stories of, there was the first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, who wrote the Tanya, and his son, the Mittler Rebbe, who became the next Rebbe of Chabad, the second Rebbe of that dynasty, lived in the same house. One was upstairs, one was downstairs, and both of them were sitting at night and learning. In the Mittler Rebbe, in the younger one's apartment, there was a child asleep in a crib, or in a bed. The child fell out and started to cry. Now the Mittler Rebbe, the child's, I guess his father must be, was very, very involved in his learning and didn't even register that there was a baby crying. His father, I think, was upstairs, heard the crying, the Alter Rebbe, came downstairs, put the baby to sleep, solved the issue. Later, he came to his son and said, no matter how involved you are in your Torah study, always have to be on the lookout, or on the hear out, I guess. You always have to have an ear open for the crying of a child or of any Jew. And so yes, we're talking about very fascinating topics in our relationship with God and our souls, and all of that is very important, and we'll continue that next week. But in this chapter, we have an opportunity to talk about love for our fellow Jew. Let's grab it.
It seems to me that your behavior to your fellow Jew is more important whether you love him or not.
Absolutely. And that's true. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the halachic definition of loving your fellow Jew is very much action-based. Act like you love him. Whether you love him or not, we'll figure that out. But here we're talking about Tanya. We're talking about on a deeper level. We're talking about what can we aspire to. It's an aspiration, and a lifetime of work is daunting, but it's doable. And all of us can work in this direction. All it requires is a paradigm shift. Nothing major. Just realize that you are your godly soul. Now, this principle of viewing yourself as your godly soul completely changes how I relate to someone else. Right? Because thank God there's 7 of us sitting around this table. If someone does, I don't want to think of any specific examples of why you might dislike someone. I don't want to touch on any raw nerves. But if there is something that I dislike about someone else, why do I dislike them? Because we're competitors. We clash. I am me, they are them, and we want different things, we act differently. They've done something to me, right? They're hurting me. How do I combat that? And I want to just, because I mentioned those words that they are hurting me, there is an important caveat to the mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael, and that is that there is a line where if someone is actively hurting us, we don't go over and give them a hug, right? If someone's waving a knife around, there are obviously limits and there's logic but we're talking about the emotion behind it. Why do I have an issue loving a fellow as myself? Because they are not myself. And very often, they compete with me. In fact, usually the closer someone is to me, the more I interact with them, the less I'm able to love them with a full heart. There's a Yiddish song, or an English song, but it's an old camp song. To love a fellow Jew, just the same as you, is the basics of our holy Torah. He may be far from me, across the widest sea, still I'll always love him just the same. Right? No matter where, no matter when, I love every Jew. Sometimes we have to tweak that. Not no matter, even if he's across the ocean. It's easy to love people across the ocean. The problem is when they're across the table and they're bothering me. How do you combat that? Is to not view him or her as a separate body, and therefore there's my body and their body. View them as their soul. If you are fundamentally a soul person, S-O-U-L, if life revolves around the soul, you're a soul, they're a soul, and we're all one soul. As the Alter Rebbe will now explain, starting on page 1. Acting v'hine ayidei kiyum hadvarim haniskadim la'el liyes gufay nivze v'nimas be'enav rak simchasei tiyas simchas hanefesh levada. Acting on the advice mentioned above, to view one's body with scorn and contempt, and to find joy in the joy of the soul alone, as we discussed at length in last chapter. Page 2. Harei zu derech yeshara v'kala lavei lidei kiyum mitzvos v'yahavta l'rech kamecha l'chol nefesh miYisrael migadol v'yadkat. This is a direct and easy path towards fulfilling the mitzvah. You shall love your fellow as yourself, with regard to every Jew, both great and small, in spiritual stature. Ki me'achar shegufay nimas u'misoyav etzlei hanefesh v'haruach miyidea dulasan v'malasan b'sharshan u'makayram b'likim chayim. Since his body is despised and loathsome, and I want to just put an asterisk here that we're using very specific words based on what we discussed in chapter 31. We don't walk around hating our body and hating our physicality. We have to embrace it and we have to learn with it and grow with it. But here we're talking about a very specific idea, which is that the sins, the evil, the bad inclinations within me, I hate that part of me. What do I love? What do I embrace? What is my identity? My godly soul. So the Alter Rebbe is going to build 3 levels of how that changes my relationship with someone else. Right? When I start viewing someone else as a godly soul and not as their body, there are 3 levels in what then happens. First of all, usually when I dislike someone, it's because there's something about them that I look down on. There's something about them that bothers me. There's something about them that's wrong. And therefore, it irks me, it bothers me. How could they go around like this, or how can they act like that? The focus in this part is going to be sort of, you're a righteous person, and someone else is messing up. You hate them for that. They're such a sinner, they're such a low That's their body. When I'm a soul, and I view someone else's soul, suddenly I'm able to completely change the way I interact with them, right? Someone can be very different than you, and you still get along with them fine. Why? Because nothing about them bothers you. Nothing about them is you dislike, you look down on. None of it, it's all, they're different. Opposites attract. I like how they are in those ways, and I'm different, and we can all still get along. When does that become a problem? When it starts to become something that is beneath me. They like doing that, I hate doing that, and therefore I look down on them. But when looking at a soul, I have no way of gauging someone else's soul. Are they different than me? Sure. But I have no way of gauging the hierarchy of souls. How can I look down on someone if I don't know if they're above or below me? And that's the first step on this ladder. Is realizing that they may be different. They may be at odds with me, but I don't know where they are in the hierarchy. We're very judgmental. As creatures, we're extremely judgmental. So I can look at someone else's actions and look down on them. I can look at someone else's life and what they've done and what they haven't done and look down on them. But as we discussed in the last chapter, that's all their body. That's all their animal soul, their physical side. Their spiritual side, their soul is completely uncoupled from that reality. In fact, sometimes the lower the person's physical side, the higher the person's spiritual side.
Where they're acting is what you don't like, and
Right.
they may have a good soul, but if they're out there protesting against Israel, I don't love that person.
Okay, well, let's discuss that. Why don't you love that person? And I usually avoid getting to specific examples because...
Their behavior.
Okay, so it's their behavior. So I'm looking at them, and the first thing that I see is their behavior, and I can't see past that. And their behavior is a problem. I mean, no one's going to deny that. No one's going to say their behavior is good and you should love their behavior. The question is, who do you see? The person, the physical body, their mistakes, or their soul? When we're able to look, not even look past, but look beyond their mistakes. We also make mistakes, and we look past it every day. Are they on the same level as someone who's doing that? No. But we make mistakes that are maybe sometimes worse. Everybody makes mistakes. With ourselves, we look beyond it and say, but I'm still a good person. In child rearing, raising children these days, as a proud father of 3 young boys, there's a lot of advice. I'm taking all the advice that I can get. And there's a very important thing that when a child makes a mistake, you don't, God forbid, say, you are a bad child. What do you say? You're a good child, but you made a bad mistake. And that completely changes the way we view someone else. Are you making a mistake? Of course. And if I have to stop you, and if I have to disagree, we'll deal with that. But who do I see first? The mistakes or the soul? Which leads us to the next level. That when I'm looking at the soul, I don't even see someone who's different than me. I see someone who is part of the same unit. I'm going to say something that sounds silly, but it's an interesting theory. If I accidentally burn my right hand on the fire, does my left hand get mad? Of course not. It's part of one unit. The left hand is going to grab the towel, grab the ice, and solve the issue. What if my left hand accidentally smacks my right hand? Is my right hand going to get mad at my left hand? Of course not. Gershon's laugh. These are not serious conversations because we understand that it's all part of one body. And as part of one unit, we all play off each other. So too, it's true with the Jewish souls. We are all part of one body of souls. And yes, there is a hierarchy there, and there are souls that are head souls, and souls that are finger souls, and souls that are foot souls. That is true, and that's a very Kabbalistic discussion. And in this time that we go around Tanya, we're sort of glossing over a lot of the Kabbalistic aspects. I don't want to confuse everyone right off the bat. But the important thing to remember is that my heel and my head are both part of the same body. And therefore, if my heel if I stub my toe, my brain doesn't get mad at my toe. My hand doesn't get mad at my toe. It's all part of one unit. And so too, when I see someone else as a different person, when I see them as someone who's competing with me, well, now we have a problem. My right hand and my left hand are never competing with each other. They're part of one unit. And that is the way we have to view it with the soul, with our fellow Jews' soul as well. We are all part of one unit. In addition, and at the highest level of this, which the reason why the Alter Rebbe gives us this hierarchy, because this is a lifetime of work. It's going to be very hard for us to walk out of this class and see another Jewish person and say, wow, we're one. And therefore, no matter what you do, I love you with all. It's a work in progress. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe is giving us these steps of how do we work towards loving our fellow. Is first of all realize that I have to look past their mistakes and embrace their soul. And maybe their soul is higher than mine. Maybe their soul is, I don't know the hierarchy of souls. So how can I look down on someone if I don't know where they stand? Second of all, to realize that we're beyond our differences, we're one unit. My right hand and my left hand are never competing. And therefore, if I view their body, well, then we're competing for the same oxygen and the same whatever else. But if we're one unit, then we're not competing. And the final point is that at our root, every single soul is one. We all come from the exact same place. We come from God's essence, and there's no differences there. So yes, these days on this earthly earth, we all look different and we all look as separate units, but we're really one. And these are the three levels of when I change my outlook. When I stop viewing everyone as their body, as their mistakes, but I view myself and everyone else as a soul, suddenly there's no competition, suddenly there's no differences, suddenly we are all one. As the Alter Rebbe continues, I'll start again from that second paragraph on page 2. Since his body is despised and loathsome, he will not love himself on account of his body more than he loves his fellow. And as for the soul and the spirit, the differences between his own soul and that of his fellow surely will not diminish the love between them. For who can know the soul and spirit's greatness and excellence in their source and root, the living God? Okay, so how can you look down on someone if you don't know where they stand? That's level 1. Continuing. Furthermore, they are actually all equal. And not only equal, yet separate, but furthermore, they are all have one Father, one source within their source, and they all comprise one entity. It is on account of this common root that in the one God that all of Israel are called brothers in the full sense of the word, and not only figuratively in the sense of relatives or similar in appearance and the like. Only the bodies are distinct from each other. Are we different bodies? Yes. We are absolutely different physical bodies. But our souls are all one, our souls are all connected and equal, and our souls are all souls. And therefore, by changing my outlook, by switching from a bodily outlook, of that I view everyone through the eyes of my body and I see their body, and then we're all separate and we're different and we're competing with each other and we hate each other, God forbid, suddenly it becomes all about the soul. Do they make mistakes? Absolutely. Do they compete with me? Absolutely. But that is their body, not their soul. And the question is, what do I see? Do I see their body, or do I see my fellow Jewish soul? Continuing on page 3.
Hashem says, love your neighbor as yourself. Also says, if you love God, you hate evil.
Yes.
So, if the behavior, I love your soul, but what you're doing is evil, therefore I'm going to stop you.
The Alter Rebbe will address that exact verse in the second half of this chapter. Because Lensley making a good question. This is all nice and beautiful until I meet a bad person. What do I do then? Continuing on page 3, V'lachein ha'esim gufam ikar v'nafsham tefela i'efsher liyes ava v'achva amitis b'neihem ella hatliya b'davar levadi. Therefore, there can be no true love and fraternity between those who regard their bodies as primary and their souls as secondary, but only a love based on an external factor. The only way to fully achieve the mitzvah of love your fellow as yourself is to realize that your fellow is yourself. That's the only way to do it. If I love someone else for any other reason, it could be the deepest love, it could be the most strong bond that exists, but it will always depend on something. You give me something, you make me feel something, you provide for me, I provide, whatever relationship is there, right? Even the idea of I enjoy spending time with someone, then it's about me, right? It's all, any love, any time that you like someone else, what do you like about them? One of my famous lines is, not famous, one of my favorite lines is someone says, I really like chocolate. I said, no, you don't like chocolate. If you like chocolate, you keep all the chocolate in the world safe. You like yourself and you enjoy the taste of chocolate. I like my friend. Do you like your friend? Or do you like hanging out with your friend? Where does it come? Where does a true love come from? A true love comes from somewhere beyond, where it's not about us as two different bodies. It's about my ability to view you as something else, which is why the closer we come to this idea is with familiar bonds. With Hashem's help and a healthy family, there's a love that exists. And it's not just a transactional love, it's a deeper love. It's still dependent on something. It's still about the fact that we're related, and it's still, there is a nuance there, but it's a step closer to that true bond. Why? Because I recognize that you are not some random stranger. We're part of one unit. There's a connection there. If I can realize that connection about every single one of my fellow Jews, I can feel that love for every single one of my fellow Jews. Which is why this mitzvah of love your fellow as yourself is the perfect example of the principle of being a soul person, S-O-U-L. I'm spelling that out because S-O-L-E is a very different meaning to be a soul person, the last person alive. We're talking about if you are a person who views the world around you and views yourself through the eyes of your soul, suddenly you can fully fulfill this mitzvah. You can be the truest, you can fulfill this mitzvah to the truest extent, which is why there's a fascinating story in the Talmud. Many of you may be familiar with it. There was a non-Jewish person who was bored and decided he's going to go have some fun with the Jewish people. Whether or not his intentions were pure is argued in the commentaries. But he went to the great sage Shammai. He walked in and said, I'm looking to convert, but I want you to teach me the entire Torah as I stand on one foot. Give me the cliff notes. That's all I'm interested in. Shammai sent him out. He said, don't waste my time. That's not a serious question. Conversion is a very, very serious thing. You need to take it seriously. You need to sit down, learn for a couple years, then we can talk. What is this coming in here like this? So he left. He went across the street to the other great sage of that time, the sage Hillel, and he said the same thing. Teach me the entire Torah as I stand on one foot. Anybody know what Hillel's answer was?
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Close. It was that principle.
Don't do that.
The rest is complicated.
A combination of Ron and Len.
Don't do that that you wouldn't do to yourself.
He said the idea, man desan lach lachavrach leisav. Whatever you don't like to be done to yourself, don't do to your friend. Everything else is commentary. Now, the commentaries on the Talmud, where the story is brought, really struggle with this line. Because we can't say that Hillel was just sort of, making fun, or Hillel was making light. Hillel is teaching Torah.
Wait, what did he say?
He said, whatever is what is Torah? Whatever you don't like to be done to yourself, don't do to your fellow.
Also, he was saying that.
That phrase. He said that phrase in Aramaic, ma desan lach lachavrach leisave. What you hate, don't do to your fellow. Idach pirushahu. Everything else is just a commentary. And the commentaries struggle with this. What does that mean? That is the entire Torah. We know that the mitzvos are divided between us and God, Shabbat, Kashrut, those kind of mitzvos. And then there are mitzvos between us and our friend. It's still a mitzvah, but don't steal, don't kill. Those are human mitzvos, interpersonal mitzvos. So you want to tell me that that's the basis for all of the interpersonal mitzvos? I can accept that. Because, I don't like to be killed, so I shouldn't kill anyone else. It's a pretty basic principle. But how does that account for all the mitzvos between us and God? How does that have anything to do with keeping Shabbos? How does that have anything to do with eating kosher? And you know what? The problem is that Hillel sort of backed himself into a corner. He didn't say this is a great principle, right? Rabbi Akiva said that. He said, love your fellow as yourself. That is a great principle to Torah. It's a very important point. All right, that I can accept. But that is the entire Torah? That's everything? It's not everything. It's barely half the mitzvahs. And that's actually why the commentaries, Rashi, has a different explanation. He says this is not at all about interpersonal things. This is about your God is in a certain verse called your friend, your fellow. And so just like when you don't like when people disobey you, don't disobey God. But that's not the simple reading. That's not the way that most of us have learned the story. That's not the answer that the Alter Rebbe goes with. But now we can understand what Hillel was talking about. How is this the basis of the entire Torah? I don't want something to be done to me Therefore, I don't do it to my friend. Why not? Because I realize that we are both the same. Which means I am a soul person. I'm someone who views the world through the view of the soul. That's the basis for everything. Everything we do when we keep the Torah is all about living a life of the soul. When I make a decision to keep kosher, when I make a decision to keep Shabbos, or whatever it is, why do I make that decision? Because I'm doing what my soul wants to do. I am being a soul person. What is the purest form of being a soul person? Loving your fellow as yourself, not doing unto others that which you don't want done unto yourself. As the Alter Rebbe continues on page 4, V'zehu she'amar Hillel hazakin al kiyam mitzvah zu, zehu kol ha'torah kula ve'idich pirushahu. This explained Hillel the elder statement concerning the mitzvah, the fulfillment of this mitzvah. This is the entire Torah. The rest is but commentary. Now we understand. How is it but commentary? Because it's another expression. Lighting Shabbat candles, putting on tefillin, eating something that's kosher is an expression of being a soul person, which is what the mitzvah of loving your fellow is all about. When you fulfill the mitzvah of loving your fellow as yourself to the purest extent, all the other mitzvahs fall into place. Because you're such a soul person, obviously you're only going to listen to what the soul wants you to do. There's another level here that the Alter Rebbe goes into. It gets a little bit Kabbalistical, so we'll explain it first and then we'll read it inside, which is, why are we here? I surprised everyone with a very existential question. Why are we here? God put us into this world to make the world a godly place, to make a place that God wants to come. This becomes, instead of being a physical, dark, evil world, we add light, we add bits of light, until, yes, it's in vogue. Thank you for joining me so I didn't feel so embarrassed. What is this all about? We're here to bring godliness down to this world. How do we do that? By making more and more of the world godly. How is that done? We know one thing about God. Where does God feel comfortable? In a place where there is peace and unity. We say in the Sim Shalom, at the end of the Amidah, there's a blessing where we ask God for peace. And what do we say?
No, I got it.
We say, Barchenu Avinu Kulanu Ke'echad. Bless us, Father, as one.
Why didn't God make a perfect world? Why did he make a world with evil?
Why did he make a world like that? Because otherwise there'd be no purpose to anything. God wants us to work towards that. Yes, God created an imperfect world and gave us the opportunity to fix it, because God has plenty of angels. God has plenty of God has plenty of angels who live in a perfect spiritual realm where there's nothing wrong and everything is hunky-dory, beautiful, seen together in a circle and sing songs. But that's not what God wants. There's no effort there. There's no struggle. There's no growth.
So he did it to give us purpose.
Yes, absolutely. We were created to have purpose.
Why do we leave out war? Why do we leave out war?
What do you mean?
Particularly related to a portion this week. You say your description is peace.
So,
Why not say start with war? Because we'll always have evil. We have to have God in our midst during times of war as well.
So there is, it's an interesting question, because we're talking here about peace between people. War is not on its own a bad thing. We always try to avoid war. We don't look out for war. But if there's evil that has to be dealt with, we're proud and eager to fight it. Whether that means literal battle or it means more figuratively fighting with it. But when we talk about God wants peace, it means between all of us. How do we get peace between all of us? How do we live in unity with each other, which then invites God to come into our lives? Through this principle of viewing each other as not competition, but as one soul. By viewing each other through the eyes of the soul, and therefore as one unit. As the Alter Rebbe continues.
So we're supposed to do this for the non-Jews?
That's a very good question. And I preface at the beginning, and it comes up every couple of chapters.
Because our war is usually with somebody else,
Right.
not with the Jews.
If only it were true. If only it were true like that. But there is definitely this principle is true for every human being, but there are degrees and there are levels. This idea that we are one unit is the brotherhood of Judaism idea. Yes, we are. There are degrees of unity, in the sense that my fellow Jew, I am one with them. Someone else, I'm not. Right? We're both human. I have to respect them, and I have to do all the important things of what it means to be, a fellow human, and they have a purpose. And in broad strokes, they're part of this idea as well. But this level of granularity, that we are one, we're one soul with one purpose, with one, that almost like accidentally got divided into different bodies, that is exclusively a Jewish thing. Not to the exclusion of everyone else, that this doesn't apply to them at all. But there are definitely degrees in that idea, which is why so many mitzvos apply to our fellow Jew. In this week's Parsha, there are lots of mitzvos that we say apply to our fellow Jew. Not because we hate everyone else and we're looking to harm them, but because there are certain things you'll do for your brother that you wouldn't do for someone else. Right? The famous mitzvah of lending money without interest. That is exclusively to our fellow Jew. Why? It's not because I hate everyone else and I want to see them fail. It's because my money should be making me more money. I should be investing it in business. I should be doing something else with it. One of the things I can do with my money to make money is I can lend it to someone else.
To allow you to perfect the world even better.
Right, exactly. But even on a very transactional level, right? My money is supposed to be doing things. Now, I'll lend money to a friend or to someone I don't know, but there has to be some benefit to me. I'm putting my money at risk. My money should be doing things for me. But for my brother, of course I'll lend him money without interest. He's my brother. That's how God wants us to all see each other. Not that I hate everyone else and therefore I'm looking to mess them over by charging them interest, but I'm doing something special for my brother, and that's a much different conversation. But I just want to clarify that, yes, these ideas are primarily to our fellow Jew. In broad strokes, they apply to everyone, and definitely the idea of loving and respecting and tolerating, definitely, everyone else applies to every human being. Ki yesod v'sheidish kol haTorah hu lahagbiya v'alis hanefesh al haguf ma'ila ad ikara v'sharsha d'chol amen. For the basis and root purpose of the entire Torah is to elevate and exalt the soul high above the body to God, the source and root of all words. And also to draw down the infinite light of Ein Sof into the community of Israel, as will be explained further, meaning to the fountainhead of the souls of all Israel, so that the one God will reside within Israel, but only insofar as they are one, i.e. united. In English, we are trying to draw down God into this world to live among us. Right? The commandment of building a temple is build a temple so that God can live among us. But God will only live among us when we are in unity with each other. What was the cause of the destruction of the Holy Temple? The Talmud tells us, when there was baseless hatred between Jewish people. Just like for a parent who loves all their children, to see their children fighting becomes very uncomfortable and they want to leave. So too, when we are at odds with each other, God doesn't want to be around us. And God takes a temporary leave of absence and we don't feel his presence anymore. So what's the antidote to that? How do you bring God into our lives? By being at peace with each other. And ultimately bringing God into our lives is the purpose of everything, which is another way how this mitzvah of loving your fellow as yourself is the foundation to the entire Torah. As concluding at the bottom of the page, so too do we say in our prayers, bless us our Father as we are all as one with the light of your countenance, indicating that the light of God's countenance can only be revealed when we are united, all as one, as explained elsewhere at length. Wonderful. Done. Except that Len asked a very good question earlier. What about those people that I'm supposed to hate?
Right.
There are some people, and this is not just an emotional thing that they're bothering me, so therefore I want to hate them, right? Read the first half of the chapter again a couple of times. But the Torah itself tells us that there are certain people I'm supposed to hate. There are bad, wicked, evil people. They make mistakes.
Or at least their behavior, right?
That's Len starting to zero in on the answer. You asked, and you're starting to answer as well.
Again, is that about non-Jews that we're supposed to hate, or Jews? Because, we have a lot of people that hate us, so we...
So I'll answer that in two stages.
Okay.
Number one is the practical,
Okay.
which is we absolutely do not embrace people who are looking to stab us in the back.
Okay.
That's never, whether they're Jewish, non-Jewish, that's not healthy, that's not the Torah. The number one rule of anything is to protect ourselves and to continue living a long and healthy life. But that's on a practical level. On an emotional level, do I hate someone that disagrees with me? Now, there is a question that's, the obvious middle ground that we're missing here is, what about someone who's looking to destroy me? Do I have a mitzvah to love them as well? Let's finish the chapter and we'll come back and we'll see if we have any more clarity on that. To keep it simple, the Alter Rebbe really focuses on someone who I have a mitzvah to hate. Why do I have a commandment to hate them? Because they are a sinner. They sin. They act out against God. Where does that come from? Continuing on page 5. Umasha kasav b'gemara shemi shirayeh b'chaveri shechata mitzvah lasanesei v'gam leima l'rabbi sheyisaneu. As for the Talmudic statement that if one sees his friend sinning, he should hate him, and should also relate the fact to his teacher that he too will hate him, how does this conform with what we said above? The Talmud says very clearly, if you see your friend sinning, you have to hate them. You have to have a displeasure, a dislike, a hatred for them. Not only that, but you have to spread the love. You have to spread the hate. You have to let your teacher know, assuming you guys share the same teacher, and say, that person acted out, did these sins, and therefore we have to hate him for it.
Yeah, Lashon Hara.
So Lashon Hara, it is Lashon Hara, it's gossip, but because there's a purpose, it's a mitzvah, there's a reason for that, right? It's not Lashon Hara to tell someone, that guy's going to scam you. It's not
But
a
when you refer to chata,
Mm-hmm.
we consume all the time. We sins every day, all the time.
Exactly.
So,
Right? So, our question is more on the Talmud than it is on the first half of the chapter, right? Because we do sin all the time.
right.
So the first thing Alter Rebbe says is, before you start hating your friend, you have to define, what does it mean, your friend? The Talmud is very clear. If you see your friend sinning, you have to hate them. Now some people will just say, love the sinner, hate the sin. But that's not what it says. It says you have to hate them. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe starts off in saying that this is not universal. If you see a random stranger sinning, there's no mitzvah to hate them. It's your friend. It's someone who, A, is on the same level as you. Someone who you are equal with. Someone who, both of you have the same background, both of you have the same standards, and they're messing up. And it's someone that you're supposed to have an effect on.
And they might want you to tell them to do something.
So that's an important part of this equation as well. Let's continue inside. Hainu b'chaverei b'Torah u'mitzvahs. This applies to only to one's companion, one's equal in the study of Torah and the observance of mitzvahs. We're equals. We both have the same background. For me to look at someone, I had the incredible luxury. I grew up religious. I will never look at someone who didn't grow up religious and judge them, or even, God forbid, hate them for the fact that they don't live a life the same standard as mine. We're two completely different stories. It's not up to me to judge that person. It's not up to me, right? And the outcome of the judging them is the hatred. I'm judging them that they're sinning, and therefore, I cannot, which, by the way, you can apply this logic to anyone. Even someone who's exactly the same as me and grew up with me, I don't know their struggles. I don't know where they've come from. I don't know what they've done. I don't know what they're battling. And therefore, for me to judge and thereby hate someone, first, I have to make sure that we're on the exact same standards. And really realize that we're comparable. And then I can judge where they're at. Right? What's the thing? Don't judge someone until you walk a mile in their shoes, because then you're a mile away and you just stole their shoes, so who are you to judge? This idea of I have a commandment to hate someone is very, very specifically when it's someone that I know for certain that they should be doing better. And that's the key. If I know that they should be doing better and they're not, maybe we can have a conversation about it. Until then, who am I to judge? Also, it's someone who, not only am I friends with them, but I should be, before I start hating them, I have to see if I can have an effect on them. Before I judge them, maybe they need a reminder, maybe they need a little kick in the pants to get back on the straight and narrow, and I have a mitzvah to do that. In a case where I'm friends with someone, I know them, and they'll be willing to accept my criticism, I have a mitzvah to critique them and remind them what they should be doing. As the Alter Rebbe continues, He has also fulfilled what we're talking about. Who do I judge? First of all, I have to make sure that we're comparable, that I know where they're coming from and I know that they should be doing better because we're equals. Second of all, he has also fulfilled with him, the sinner, the injunction, you shall repeatedly reprove your friend. The word here for your friend also indicates, the Talmud points out, am she'itra. He who is on par with you in the Torah and mitzvahs, who nevertheless has not repented of his sin, as it is written in Sefer Charedim.
So he doesn't want you to tell him you're just wasting your breath.
If someone doesn't want me, if I know that someone's not going to accept my criticism, I should not criticism. There is a mitzvah. Criticism is a strong word. I like the word critique better. I don't know if there's a linguistical difference, but it feels softer. I have a mitzvah to critique someone who's messing up. But there's conditions to that. If I know that they're not going to listen to me, I do not get involved. If I don't know them, a random stranger walking up to you in the middle of the street and saying, by the way, you should be, that's not productive and that's not my role. So if there's someone that I know, and I know their background, and I know that they really should be doing better, and I've already done my part, maybe we can talk about it. But until then, the Alter Rebbe continues, but to one who is not his companion, his equal in Torah and mitzvahs, so that even his deliberate transgression is regarded inadvertent sin, since he is unaware of the gravity of his sins, nor is he on intimate terms with him, not only must we not be enjoined to hate him, but on the contrary, he must in fact strive to become closer to him, as the Alter Rebbe states shortly. If I don't know that person's background, or even if I do know their background, but I am not in a position to judge them, there is no mitzvah to hate them. Which means 99.9% of the people that we interact with in the day-to-day life, while I don't approve of what they do, for that I don't have a mitzvah to hate them. Hatred, for me to look at someone and say, they know better, they should be doing better, they're not doing better, and therefore I judge them and I hate them, that doesn't apply to most people. How do I interact with such a person? How do I interact with a person who who acts in such a way? We have another teaching of Hillel. Hillel teaches us, continuing on page 6, therefore, on the contrary of this situation, Hillel said, be one of the disciples of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving creatures and drawing them near to the Torah. Interact with them only through love. Which, by the way, the Alter Rebbe is about to point out, there's some interesting phrasing. When we're referring to another human being, there's a number of words we can use, even in Hebrew. What word is used here? Briot, a creature. Literally, the only redeeming factor about them is the fact that God created them, that they're a creature of God. They're not even acting like a human being. They're so full of sin, so full of mistakes, so full of wrongdoing, you barely recognize the human anymore. And yet, what does the Torah say? Love them. Act like Aaron. Aaron was 100% love. Which, as the Alter Rebbe says what I just said, it says, this usage of the term creatures in reference to human beings means that even those who are far from God's Torah and His service, for which reason they are classified simply as creatures, indicating that the fact that they are creatures that they are God's creatures is a sole virtue, even those one must attract with strong cords of love. There is also another point here, that no matter how much we love someone else, no matter how much we want to pull them closer, it says very specifically, umakarvan la Torah. Bring them closer to the Torah. We never bring the Torah closer to them. Yes, they're on their journey, they're getting closer and closer to the Torah, they're making strides. But we never change the Torah for them. We never say that the Torah doesn't apply to them. It does apply to them, and they're getting closer. We never compromise the Torah, we draw them closer, and they can be in whatever part of their journey they are. When you interact with someone through love, that's the beginning and end of it. When I love someone else because I have no mitzvah to hate them, as we discussed, what do I have? I have another soul that's struggling, another soul that's that's stuck in a body that's making mistakes. All I can do is love them. And maybe through that love, they'll come closer and closer. But even if not, I still love my fellow Jew. One of the things, the big conspiracy theories about Chabad is that we pretend to love you in order to bring you closer to God. The opposite is true. We love you so much that one of the services we provide is bringing you closer to God. If you don't want to come along, great. Come and enjoy the chicken soup. That's not a problem. Because it all starts with the love. What's the outcome of that? Well, if you love someone, you'll bring them closer to God. It works, great. It doesn't work, and you just continue loving them. As the author continues in the next two paragraphs, perhaps thereby one will be able, after all, to draw them closer to the Torah and the service of God. And even if it failed, he has not forfeited the merit of the mitzvah of neighborly love, which he has fulfilled by the efforts of his direction. Loving our fellow Jew, no matter what state they're in, because I see the soul, and I'm recognizing the soul beyond what they've done, no matter what they're protesting, no matter what they're saying, beneath the mistakes that the body is making, there is a soul which is there for me to love. Is it hard? Of course it is. The same way it's really, really hard for me to love someone when their body looks different than mine, when they have things that bother me, that irk me. It's hard, but the mitzvah is still there. There's also the mitzvah to love my fellow Jew no matter what they've done. Even if they've done so many wrong things that they're barely recognizable as human anymore, I have to see beyond that. I have to see beyond the mistakes that the body is making to the soul underneath. All right? So we've knocked out 99% of people. What about those who I am supposed to hate? What about those that they're my friend and I know they should be doing better? Right? What about there's someone who either the mistake is so bad that anyone should know better, or they, right? And in this area where we are comparable, and therefore maybe I should be hating them. Continuing on the bottom. Furthermore, even those whom one is enjoined to hate, for they are close to him, and he has reproved them, but they still have not repented of their sins, one is obligated to love them as well. Even the narrow window of someone who I am supposed to hate, I have to love them as well.
So have to be careful they don't influence you. You used Aaron as an example, and he's the typical example of loving your fellow man. Mm-hmm. But it got him into trouble when they wanted to make an idol and worship it. And he joined in that, and he got punished.
So it's an interesting point that Len is bringing up about how we can't love so much. There's an expression: you can't be so open-minded that your brain falls out. It's good to be open-minded, but there have to be limits, and that's also true when it comes to love. And I will say that should be a discussion that's had about the expression of our love, not regarding the love itself. Aaron, I'm not going to start rehashing Aaron's involvement in the sin of the golden calf. There's a lot of layers there, and although obviously it was a mistake and he repented for it and he felt that it was a mistake, there were reasons why he did it. It wasn't just a blind love that he loved his fellow Jew, therefore he's going to help them sin. Aaron was smarter than that. It was more about the fact that he was hoping that his involvement would slow them down enough that Moses would come back in time, which is a side discussion, so if we didn't catch any of that, don't worry about it. It's just, we do have to realize that the expression of the love has to be done with logic, and sometimes the more we love someone, the more we have to control them. And yes, sometimes as a parent or as a loved one, we have to do painful things to someone. And they say, don't you love me? How can you possibly take away my toy? And the answer is, because I love you, I'm causing you a little bit of pain, I'm taking away the toy, but that's just because the toy that you chose is a sharp knife. And there are definitely sort of, the expression of the love has to be done logically and properly, but the love itself has to be limitless and has to be all-encompassing. Except when the person is a legitimate sinner, and we went through all the steps. I'm equal to them, and I already told them off, and I already critiqued them, and they haven't repented. So now we have to realize that they are still a nuanced human being. There's the part of them that I hate, the sinner, the fact that they're messing up even though they know better, but there's also the soul. The soul is still there, and I love that as well. Continuing on page 7, ושתיהם הם אמס, שנאה מצד הרשע בהם, ואהבה מצד בחינת הטבע, הגנוז שבהם, והוא ניתוס הליכוס שבתיכם, המחיה נפשם ליכוס. And both the love and the hatred are truthful emotions in this case, since the hatred is on account of the evil within them, while the love is on account of the good hidden within them with the divine spark, within them that animates the divine soul. For this spark of godliness is present even in the most wicked of one's fellow Jews. It is merely hidden. And another thing, in addition to love and hate, there's a third emotion that we have to feel, and that is rachmanis, pity. It's really hard. It's really hard to hate someone when you pity them. And so if you're really struggling with this, think about how sad it is for that soul, the fact that it's stuck in a body making those mistakes. And once you have pity, the love follows that. As you continue,
see pity as a gift for us?
yeah,
To suddenly find that you possess that feeling of pity for somebody else,
yeah.
which you may not have done before. And
Yeah.
suddenly,
Being able to view someone with empathy, being able to view someone with, I'm so sorry they're going through that, right? If someone, this is a very, very specific example, then again, we're not talking about in real life, we're talking about in the hypothetical. If somebody robs you, and instead of feeling hatred and anger, you feel pity, I'm so sorry that they are in such a place in their life that they feel a need to do that. Again, this is not in real life that quickly get torn apart. But in the hypothetical, where someone is starving for bread, and they're a good person, and they're forced to steal, if you can feel that pity, the hatred and the anger fall away. And that is exactly what, again, I saw some faces around the table, so I don't want to get too drawn down in that exact example, because very quickly you lose the plot and you have so much pity that you're willing to let things slide that shouldn't be, and you go into a bad area. But the theory behind it, of if I see someone sinning, and instead of feeling hatred or anger, how can you do such a thing? I feel pity that they're stuck in that situation, that their godly soul is stuck, God forbid, sinning. I have pity, which can lead to love. As we continue, one must also arouse compassion on the divine soul of the sinner, for in the case of the wicked is an exile within the evil sitra achra which dominates it, and that pity, that rachmanos that I feel, the compassion, that's a better word. Compassion banishes hatred and arouses love, as is known from the verse, Jacob who redeemed Abraham, which is a different conversation, but those words, sometimes Jacob, which represents compassion, can jumpstart, even when there's no love to be found, because I hate the person for what they've done. If I can arouse compassion, pity, then that will bring love. And then the Alter Rebbe continues, finishes in the brackets, David HaMelech al Vashalem Tachlis Sinas Anesim Ela Al Minim VaBrekursim She'en Lam Chelik V'Lekei Yisrael. That was on page 8. As for the statement of King David, peace upon him, I hate them with a consummate hatred, reserving no love for them whatsoever. This refers only to Jewish heretics and atheists who have no part in the God of Israel. And this is a very, very, very extreme example of someone who actively acts out against Judaism and should know better, right? It's not because of their background, but someone who knows what God is, knows what the truth is, and yet acts out. So if you're in the level of King David, you can hate such a person, but the rest of us will work on that. And there's two things that I'll say about that point. Number one is this idea of a heretic, of someone who knows God and acts out against God. They are someone who are deserving of hatred. Again, if you're on the level of King David, you can judge them to that level. There's the story of the heretic that comes into town and says, I'm a heretic. In Hebrew the term is an apikoros. I disavow any of it. I'm a heretic. And so the rabbi says, it's fascinating. I live in a small shtetl. I've never had a conversation, an argument with a real heretic. Can we talk about it? I said, sure. I'm proud of my heresy. It's all right. Can you talk to me? What do you think about this portion of the Talmud, this story? He says, Talmud, I don't study Talmud. I'm a heretic. All right, Talmud. What about the Mishnah? Going back further in history, this Mishnah, Mishnah, I don't study Mishnah, I'm a heretic. All right, let's go back to the Chumash, to the Torah. What do you say about this verse? The Torah? I don't study Torah, I'm a heretic. The rabbi said, you're not a heretic, you're ignoramus. To be a heretic means you know and you study and you actually appreciate it and you choose to rebel against it. All of us and everyone we come across doesn't get to this level. To have the full, unencumbered past and choose to rebel against it, then we're talking about a very, very special flavor that we don't really come across. And the last thing I will say, because the last second half of this chapter spoke about that some people there is a need to hate. And you know what? What if you do find someone who really, really deserves it, really deserves the hatred? So the previous Rebbe, who really started off the outreach in Chabad of no matter where people were doing, or holding, and what they were doing, bringing them forward in love. So there were his fellow Jews, other rabbis, that said, how can you do that? The code of Jewish law says that there are certain Jewish people you have to reject. You can't embrace them. How are you able to embrace them? The Friedrich Rebbe, the previous Chabad Rebbe, answered, said those laws about the Jews that we are required to hate is not in the first section of the Shulchan Aruch of the Code of Jewish Law. It's not in the second section, not in the third section. It's in the fourth section of the Shulchan Aruch, the last section. And even within that fourth section, it's all the way at the end. It says in Judaism, we read from right to left. I'm starting at the beginning. When I get to the end, when I'm perfect in everything else, that's when I'll worry about those laws. And that's a lesson for us as well. Is that when we come across someone who we start to judge them and we're thinking maybe there's someone who maybe doesn't deserve all the love, maybe I have to judge them and hate them for what they're doing wrong. Are you perfect in the love? Are you perfect in the first 3.5 sections before you get to the very end? And first of all, we can always judge ourselves, and before we look at someone else and throw rocks, we have to look at our own glass house and make sure that we are perfect, which we're not. So why don't we focus on that first? But finally, in this incredible chapter, in this heart of Tanya, the heart of everything that we have going on is love your fellow as yourself, because they are a soul. Do they have a body that's messing up? Yes. Do they have a body that's looking to harm me? Yes. But if I can look beyond that and see the soul, the beauty of underneath it, I can still love them, even while taking precautions for everything else. But I can love who they truly are, their soul, and look beyond the body that separates us, that competes with me, and that bothers me so very much. Thank you everyone for joining. God willing, next week we will continue chapter 33 as we continue in the